But we got a couple guests coming on, and these are a couple guys I know. And I'm looking forward to you meeting them and hearing their story. So why don't we bring them in right now? This is Joel, Fieri, and Jefferson Drexler. Oh, look at these guys.
Good morning, gentlemen.
These guys are pros.
Good morning.
Wow, you guys look great.
Thanks. This is our new studio. We decided to debut it on the Romeo and Michael show. What do you think?
Right.
I am amazed. So this is all set up just for us?
You can be amazed at what kind of lumber you can find in the back alley. You know, just take apart a couple pallets and make it happen.
Did you actually construct this set?
Yeah, pretty much. I can't claim it. I'm recovering from shoulder and back surgery, so but I wrote the checks, so he did the work. Usually the way
that means that he did it.
Yeah. Usually the way it works around here. So I stay out of everyone's way and make sure the check's clear, and that's how it works.
It's funny, people ask me to stay away from power tools.
For your safety and those around you, right?
Yes.
All right, guys. So I see the sign in the back, Christian Podcast Central. I know there's a lot more to you guys than Christian Podcast Central, but first, let us, our audience, know what you guys are doing there. What is CPC?
Okay. Would you like to take it?
Oh, well, yeah, so ChristianPodcastCentral.com. It's basically a chief rival to you guys. No, it is it's also a podcast network where we are looking at being kind of a hub for podcasts, videos, content that not only draws people to God, but really amplifies the fact that you don't have to be a mega church pastor. You don't have to be, a multi-billion-dollar or best-selling author in order to hear from God and deliver truths on His behalf. And so, Joel has a show. I've had a couple of shows. We've had several of our other partners that have worked with us. Mike, you've been on our network as well with different efforts that you've done. And really, it's just a ton of people who know that there are certain messages. I mean, you guys, I'm sure have had this where, like, this isn't from me and I'd be self-centered to keep it within myself. And so therefore we got to put this out there. And as we kind of like started, gosh, this has been 10 years now.
10 years, yeah.
As we've been battling these ideas and then saying, hey, well, what about this? And what about that? Next thing you know, one show turned into 20, and we've got a bunch of different shows on our network.
Awesome. Nice. Now, you're not, I mean, that's not what you do for a living. Well, I know you do that, I guess, full time now, but that's not where you guys started. Like, can maybe both of you give your background and how you came to this? Let's start with Joel now.
Actually, my background is in business. First off, I was trained in the printing industry and also photography. I studied photography in college, and then I went into education. So I was a high school teacher for about 12, 15 years. How this came about, actually, very long story, as you can imagine. But I wasn't doing video in this. We're in our studio now in this building. I was doing T-shirt printing for a church that I was leasing the building from, and there was a green screen, kind of like the one behind you, Michael, in the corner. And this building was a former church that pioneered video venues, and where Jefferson was the video pastor, pioneering video venues. And there was a green screen in this building, and I knew that had something to do with video. And I called a missionary friend of mine that I knew was doing a TV show out of a boxing gym, corner of a boxing gym somewhere, and asked him if he'd like to come do a show at my building while I was printing T-shirts. So he did. And then through some circumstances, Jefferson came in to see what we were doing and started directing the show, just started taking over direction. And I thought, this guy knows what he's doing. This is kind of interesting. And we finished the show, and it went pretty well. And it's funny, the story I like to tell, the key moment probably in this whole process is when Jefferson looked at me and said, "Joel, I love the vision you have for this place." And I just went, "Vision? I'm printing t-shirts." "Oh, no, you're not." And I go, "Well, do you want to tell me what that vision is?" And so,
How do you
10
see
years,
my vision, right?
yeah, really. Thank you. Please tell me what my vision is. But it's funny because I did in the back of my mind. And that's one of the times where that still small voice says, "Oh, yes, you do, Joel. The Lord was saying, I brought you here for a purpose, for a reason." So we spent the last 10 years figuring out what my vision is. So that makes sense. So, and see, big secret, you guys keep this between just us and your thousands of viewers. I don't know what I'm doing. I stay out of everyone's way. Mostly I stay out of Jefferson's way. And like I said before, I make sure that it checks it. So
it's a perfect fit on our show. Do we know what we're doing? I'm kind of telling people, well, we should do this, we should do that. Everybody that's involved in what we're doing, they've never done production. They've never done, like Romeo, my co-host on the show, the first time he was ever on camera, and not just on camera on YouTube, but first time. Romeo, tell him.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been on camera before, other than like home movies at a birthday party. I mean, if you count that. But my first day here when we went live, that was my first time.
I just threw him into the fire. Let's do it.
Wow.
Well, that's how you refine things, right?
well, yeah, and honestly, this whole enterprise, the physical studio itself, which is another whole story, and the podcast network were mainly built around Jefferson's skill set and his abilities and his ministry, basically, honestly.
My skill set is like playing with Legos, though. So
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not hard to get Jefferson to produce videos and to be behind the camera or in front of the camera. He's equally good at both. So, Mama Fieri raised a boy smart enough to know that if you're not, you have to know your limitations. And I pretty much knew that if I just enabled Jefferson and other really talented people around me to do what God has called them to do and what they're really skilled at doing, we'll be successful. So,
but this is a funny story that goes hand in hand with that. Is the very first podcast that we attempted to do here, it was a guy who was a mutual friend of Joel and myself, or mutual acquaintance, I should say. And he came to Joel and said, "I have an idea for a podcast. You have the perfect place for it. Can I do a podcast here?" And Joel came to me and said, "Well, what do you think about this?" And I had known this guy for a few years, and I said, "I understand his concept. He wanted to do something kind of like what they were doing on ESPN at the time." And I said, "But I want to warn you, I know this guy, and he's never completed anything in the 5 years that I've known him." And Joel said, "Well, give me that problem. Let's see what happens." And so we kind of built this podcast up where he, the host, would have either a phone guest or somebody in studio with them. And he wanted to have somebody, an engineer on the other side of the glass that was part of the show as well. And that was going to be Joel. And Joel's like, "But I can't run the board." I said, "It's okay. We'll put a fake board in front of you. You act like you're running the board, and I'll be around the corner actually, pulling all the strings." And we put this out there, and it got a lot of viewers. Just like I predicted, though, the guy kind of like fell by the wayside right away after like 8 episodes.
And it was a bad podcast. It wasn't very good, but he got viewers and he got listeners.
And it was one of those deals where it just kind of planted the seed of like, wait a minute. 1, we can do this. We're capable. 2, you don't need to know what you're doing to look like you know what you're doing. If you got the right person behind the curtain pushing the button,
Right.
Yeah,
and it all came together.
Your heart, as far as what you're doing, if your heart is in the right place, things tend to shake out well in the end. I found that throughout my whole life. If my heart is in the right place on something and I work hard at it, it shakes out.
And that's largely what we have found over the course of 10 years is we've seen God really bring us together and then guide us saying, "Okay, I'm going to take you down this path." And you think, "Okay, well then that must lead to that logical conclusion over there." And he goes, "No, I'm bringing you here so that I can bring you over here so you can meet this person, and you might take 2 steps forward in order to move forward over here. And we're just been trying to follow faithfully, as you said, Romeo, using these skills and resources that God's given each of us to find ways to glorify him.
I want to get your background, Jefferson, real quick. But before that, what did God say to Abraham? He said, go.
Kill your kid. I have 4 sons. That's what resonates with me.
Yeah, he said a lot of things to Abraham, but that was a bad opening question. What did God say to him? Read the Bible. He said, go to the place I will show you. Right? Yeah. He didn't say that place over there, that's where you're going. He said, just go. Right? So step out, get moving, and I'm going to show you in time. I will show you. So it's the obedience, right? God's definitely saying something. I can project and think I know where he's taking me, but I just have to get moving, and he'll clarify as we get closer, right? All right. So Jefferson, your background and how you met Joel, and apparently you knew each other before you went into the building and helped him, etc.
Actually, no. But, okay. Yeah. So my background, actually, I've been doing video production for close to 30 years now. I went straight from waiting tables to television. We started, I've worked at a number of different stations and organizations. I've worked in government and worked at a university for a number of years. We started actually doing streaming when I was at the university back in 2001, using Real Player as a customized encoder for all you old techies that remember. See, I knew I'd resonate with somebody. So yeah, before streaming was a thing, we were streaming, and back when stuff was still on VHS tape. But I was, as Joel mentioned earlier, I worked for the church that formerly was here when it was a small church of only about 3,000 people. And my wife and I were home church, house church, cell church type people. We led a ministry for a number of years out of our home. And so to get hired on as a church of 3,000, we're like, okay, well, this is where God's leading us. And then it blew up to about 10, 15. I think now they're around like 20,000 congregants. And we were like, all right, God, you're showing us the way out. So we took the way out. And it was a friend of mine, the guy who ran graphics at the church at the time. He and I had worked together forever. And that was kind of another mutual friend that Joel and I had. And Joel had gone to that buddy of mine, Dan, and said, hey, Dan, I want to do this video stuff with this green screen for this missionary friend with this who's going out of a boxing gym. And Dan said, I'm just swamped right now, but I know Jefferson has some time on his hands. So Dan connected the two of us. As Joel said, I thought I was coming in just as a one-time consultant. So I was trying to be very efficient and be like, okay, do this, do that, and then do this, and then you guys will be on your way. Little did I know that was God saying, I'm going to blaze a path here for the two of you for the next decade plus.
Right.
It's wonderful.
Now, I've been to the facility, and it's just like, man, I'd love to come in here and produce a whole bunch of content. Where are you guys located?
We're in Vista, California. We're in North San Diego County, just inland from Oceanside.
We're right where it goes from 71 degrees to 72 degrees all year long.
Yeah, that's the variance in the weather pattern down there. It's like, ooh, it's a cold one.
That's why I have the jacket on. It's 71 right now. It's a little cold.
Well, it's about 2 hours south of Hollywood. So all right. I don't know if you guys grasp what we're doing. Our vision here is to create 24 hours of content so that people, yes, you could go to YouTube any time of the day. It's on 24 hours, but having time slots for different shows, 24 hours a day, and you guys create content. And so when we bring guests on, most of our guests are content creators. And so you don't have to answer now, but I'd love to have one of your shows on our network, at least one of your shows, and just to get started. Because, we'll be adding
arm wrestle for it.
Hey, if you have 2 shows that you want to put on, excellent. Or if you want to start a whole new show, because we'll be expanding just in the new year. We went from just the Romeo and Michael show to expanding. We have 6 new shows. Is it 6? 5? 6 new shows immediately following us. So we're doing an hour. We have a show called Fox and Archibald on Mondays. That's a half an hour right after us. And then after that is a show called Jeff and Mike. Actually, Jeff and Mike is on at 9:30 Pacific all week, but we have Fox and Archibald at 9. And then on Tuesdays, we have a show called Miracle Mom and Michael. Then we have a show called Hollywood and History. Then we have a show called Sweet Home. And then on Fridays, we have a show called Doug Q. Michael. So we want to expand that, but obviously we're just building our team here. But when we're ready, would you guys be interested in putting a couple of shows on This Way Network?
I don't see why not.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll do it the Hollywood way, Mike. We'll have your people contact my people.
Exactly.
And,
Isn't that what's happening right now?
Yeah, I guess it is. This is my
These
people
is
right here.
people. People's is
Well, we
people.
didn't
Like,
have lunch
congrats.
yet, so
Yeah, we'll do lunch.
Yes. Well, so it's actually not far off. What shows? So let's talk about. You each have a show ongoing, or okay? Joel, tell us about your show. What's the subject matter, or is it general, or
Right.
what do you focus on?
Actually, this is my third show. I did a couple audio podcasts. First was called The Big Picture, and the second was The Best Thing You'll Hear This Week. And the Big Picture was just my take on culture and Christianity. And the best thing you'll hear this week was I would just tell people this is the best thing I've seen on the internet this week, and I would highlight something. For my current show, it's funny. I don't hide the fact of the position I'm in. I own a podcast network, and I need clicks, and I need eyes and ears listening. That's how you succeed with a podcast network. So, I need clickbait. That's just the reality of it. It's, it's in a way it's too bad, but in a way that's the game we play, right? It's a game we're playing right now. That's why you have such good looking guests, right? To get the demographic you want.
true.
Yeah. So I asked Danny, our tech guy, to do some research on what are people searching for? What are Christians who listen to podcasts? What are they searching for? What do they want to talk about? What do they want to hear? And so we do research on what the most asked questions or most searched for topics are. And he gives me a list of them, and I said, I can talk about that. And I can talk about, and I just am very straightforward. This is what you want to hear as Christian podcast listeners. This is what you want to know about. These are the questions you ask. Here's my take on it.
What are some examples off the top of your head? Any examples of what people are?
Well,
like topics?
it's funny. I was just someone just asked me that recently. My most viewed. This is how bad it gets sometimes. My most viewed video is Oprah Winfrey a Christian? And that was the most searched for topic we ever got. And that's what everybody obviously wanted to hear. But there's more serious things. Like I started off with the topic that at the time was most pressing is the church in America dying? And so I kind of did my take on that for like 3 or 4 episodes and I've done different things on is online church versus attending church, which is better, why. I've turned into kind of somewhat of a critic. I've just recently, my latest podcast is a review of the Kurt Warner American Underdog movie. There were a lot of searches, a lot of interest in The Chosen, the TV show The Chosen. So I did my take on that. Also on the Mark Driscoll, the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast, which is still, I think, the number one podcast for Christians that they're listening to. So I gave my take on that.
Well, and the one that stirred up most controversy under my roof was when you tackled Kanye West.
Oh yeah,
Because you tell my son that Kanye is being discussed. It's coming up at our dinner table.
Oh, okay. So see,
Yeah,
that's what I give the
like-
people what they want, Mike.
What did you say, Romeo?
as a side note, I don't feel like Oprah is a Christian at all. I mean, pretty much everything she says is antithetical to the Christian message.
Well, yeah, that's basically what I said.
Well, if Joe Biden can be a Catholic, then Oprah can be a Christ follower, right?
Well, it's funny. I said
President we
I
ever
don't
had
know.
was
I don't know
still an Oprah boy.
Oprah. Just not to get into no thing on Oprah, but according to her own words, she doesn't really like the God of the Bible. So I said I don't know if she's a Christian or not. I would doubt it, but I said whatever. Don't follow what she says because people follow Oprah's advice like crazy. I said, please don't follow Oprah's advice on spirituality. I don't think
I'll
she's
tell
going
you
down the right road.
a quick, very quick story. I'll leave a lot of the detail out, but I dated a girl a decade ago who was watching Oprah and her little praying to your angels thing she had going on at the time. I don't know if anyone remembers it, but she was, having all these new age authors and was encouraging people to pray to their angels, which I think we all know is completely an occult type thing. And this girl that I was dating, and I didn't find this out till I had been dating her several months, but she'd had some real bizarre experiences praying to her angels. And when I hear Oprah say things like Jesus isn't the only way, I mean, that's as batting for the other team as you can be, as you can. It's very depressing because I think she was raised in the South as a Christian, a Baptist even.
Well, transitioning from Oprah to Kanye. In fact, just
Well,
just
funny.
Go ahead.
Just real short. What my point? We talk about Oprah or Kanye or Mark Driscoll or whatever. I've pretty much come to the conclusion that the word celebrity and the word Christian may not go together.
Right.
It just, there's something about our society. We want our celebrities, we want them to validate maybe what our beliefs are or something like that. And with Kanye, I'm like, I don't know. He sounds like he's had some kind of spiritual experience in his life and he's calling it Christians. Let's give him time to grow. And for that, just let's not put him up front like we did with Bob Dylan back in the day or whoever else. Let's not put him up and get so excited that we put all this attention on him and he's pulled several different ways. And finally he just says, I don't think I want this Christianity thing. And that I've seen that happen so many times in my life. So
it's like putting a baby up on the pulpit and saying, all right, tell us what you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Jesus loves me. This I know.
And we're going to put all our hope in you.
Yeah.
I really don't know too much about Conway and his, I see the profession of faith, but then I see him, calling Joel Osteen his spiritual, mentor. And for me, and I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but for me, he loses me right there. I feel like, hey, that's sort of not the right guy at all to be calling your mentor. Name it and claim it, blab it and grab it. And
Kanye's just starting his journey and hopefully he'll get off that road and I don't know. So yes, I guess that's kind of the perspective I bring to it. This is what everybody's searching for. Here's hopefully some wisdom on it, some discernment on it. And I do my best. And then I tell people if I'm wrong, let me know. Let's talk about it. So that's kind of why we're here.
Professes a relationship with Jesus Christ and how strong it is. And the first thing I think is, well, do you have a new relationship with sin? Do you understand what I mean? Like those two are inextricably linked.
Well, Jesus didn't, let's put it this way. You don't clean the fish before you catch it. Right.
Right.
You catch the fish and then you clean it. Right. And so, Jesus, I was just in my daily reading yesterday, just that simple verse where Jesus comes across Matthew, the tax collector, It just says, he comes across this tax collector and says, "Follow me." And the very next scene is he's sitting with tax collectors and prostitutes, right? Jesus is sitting in there with tax collectors and prostitutes. It's like tax collectors. You think, what's the big deal about tax collectors? But in that culture, the tax collectors were the extortionists, right? They're corrupt. It's like, well, I'm going to charge you this much, even though the government's only going to take this much. I'm going to take this much to line my own pockets, right? And so it's, Jesus does not require us to be clean and perfect, thank God. But I do want to talk a little bit about Kanye before we talk about your show, Jefferson. Kanye, so I work at a TV show, and it's this gossip magazine TV show, and the Kardashians and Kanye, that's like, I was just working on a Kanye piece, like the birthday party of Kanye's 4-year-old and the 4-year-old, what's her name, one of the other Kardashian clan had a daughter. And so, but I'm like, Kanye, and you guys know the project that I'm working on, the Armenian genocide project, so for your information, Romeo, Joel and Jefferson, I've met with them probably the first time about 3 years ago now, telling them my long-term plans and even giving them a schedule of when I think things are going to happen. And they're like, "So when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen?" I'm like, "Well, now we have a pandemic that shut us down, et cetera, et cetera." But, it's that, like we were talking about earlier, you have a long-term vision, God is calling you to something, and you don't know when those things are going to unfold. But I do have this sense, because my project is continuing and moving in the right direction, that at some point I'm going to be in a room like with Kim Kardashian and or Kanye, because Kanye's kids are half Armenian, right? And so this whole project involves every Armenian. Like I would have 100% backing of this project from the Armenian community, and that's just the beginning, because it's a Christian story. But so anytime somebody brings up Kanye, I'm like, it's going to be interesting if and when that day happens, and I'm sitting talking to Kanye, because my son and I were riding around. I'm like, "Let me listen to your music while you're listening." He takes his earbuds out and puts it loud and listen to some music, and then this one song comes on. I'm like, "Who's that?" He goes, "Kanye." I'm like, "Have you listened to his Christian album?" Because Kanye did a whole Christian album, and my son's like, "Yep." I'm like, "It's pretty good, isn't it?" He goes, "Yep." I'm like, "Okay." So there's that,
Yeah, I'm happy. But don't even get me wrong. I'm very happy to hear Kanye say a lot of the things he said, that Jesus is Lord and his life is completely new. And so believe me, I'm happy for that. I'm not trying to seem suspect. It's
and I don't take any. I'm not the expert on Kanye. This is just one of the many subjects that come up. But this is the kind of thing. What are we doing now? We really want to talk about Kanye. So that's what my podcast.
What we're searching for.
That's what we're searching for, right? So,
right.
So that's why we try and keep our pulse on, what the Christian community, the online community is, what the vibe is, or what is viral, or whatever it is, because it is what people want to know. And hopefully I just try and provide an answer, or my thoughts anyways. So
the name of this episode will be Oprah and Kanye in the top something.
Yeah, there it is.
Don't put our names.
Hashtag closed on Sunday.
All right, Jefferson, your show. What do you?
Yeah, so like Joel, I've had a couple. My first show that I did a few years ago, it was called Real Stuff My Dad Says. And its origins were kind of funny in that my dad, as I was growing up, he was a talker, and he had all these dadisms that he'd throw at us. And my brother and I pretty much just blew him off our entire lives. And then as I grew up and had kids of my own, I realized, wait, my dad was actually kind of smart. He knew what he was talking about. And I found myself, like many of us, as we get older, I was repeating things that my dad said. And so we kind of started making a list of all these different dadisms. And then I brought my dad in the studio and I said, "Hey, let's just talk about these things one at a time." And there was like 80 some odd of these dadisms. And when he first started, he said, "Jefferson, this is kind of silly that the only people that are going to listen to this is your wife and your mother, and nobody else is even going to care that we're doing this." And I said, "Well, let's just, if nothing else, I get your voice talking about these things so I can hand them off to my kids as they grow older." Well, before you know it, and this is before my dad retired, I had made him little business cards, and he sold medical supplies, different hospitals and medical offices, and he was at an office, and one of the office managers was saying, "Oh, I'm going through this and that with my teenager. You wouldn't believe how terrible this is, and I don't understand. I can't see God in this at all." And my dad goes, "You know what? My son and I were just talking about that scenario in this podcast, this silly little thing that we do." So he gave her the business card, and it was like a month later when he went to revisit, and she's like, "I could not believe the way that you guys put that, and to hear the two of you talk about it, father, son." She's like, "So if you don't mind, I had passed on that business card to another gal who was going through similar stuff with her son." And it just kind of like we're affecting lives that people we hadn't ever met. And so that kind of really planted some seeds. And then my current show, it's just me, and it's called Parent Like You Mean It. And similarly, it's about parenting, obviously, and it's about parenting with intentionality. And as I was looking around, especially in the last few years, just realizing there's so many parents today that are so preoccupied with getting the kids, up out of bed, showered, fed, off to school, and just the little things that seem to be giant mountains in front of them, that they are not addressing life with intentionality. And so that's been my thing of looking, how can we as parents do things on purpose now so that we can see the results decades later in our kids as they become young men and women, and not just little kids that we got to take care of right now.
Right. There's two different messages that are always coming towards your children. And one is the message of the world, the siren call of the world, and all the entrappings within. And then, hopefully from Christian parents, there's that gospel message and what's right and wrong and what's important in life. And as they get older, competing with their friends, and I'm not a parent, but I mean, I was a kid at one time, so it probably makes me an expert. But if I hadn't had my father instilling in me some biblical principles from when I was very young, oh yeah, I could have turned out really bad. I'm thankful to my dad.
I can't. It's too numerous to count how many times. Like I said, I'll find myself repeating the exact same things that my dad told me. Even the things like, so I have 4 boys. I have a 10-year-old, twin 14-year-olds, and an 18-year-old. So kind of spanning that preteen to young adult gamut. And just this morning, I'm looking at one of my kids, and I'm just like, "You are such a genius. You have so much in front of you. You have so much talent. I can't." And then like that, "You are such a moron. I can't believe you're doing and saying these things and treating your mother like this." And I'm quickly remembering, oh yeah, my dad said those exact same words. Okay, so then as a father, as a Christian leader, how then can I lead this potentially genius, skilled young man to use those talents and skills for God's glory, and not highlight the moronic part of his nature that obviously comes from me?
We have a question from this is my mom, actually, the #1 fan. She always gets top billing. Jefferson, could you give us an example of a dadism?
Oh, gosh, there's so many.
Underwear rule.
Yeah, the underwear rule, I think, is what some people's favorite seems to be. And that is, and my dad still tells me now, from grandfather to father, he goes, "Hey, son, remember the underwear rule." And that is that once a child sees somebody in their underwear, then that person loses a little bit of credibility. So if your kids have seen you in your underwear, by their very nature of that moment, you've lost a little bit of credibility. And so what that means, though, is so I can tell my kid, "Hey, son, you really should be doing A, B, C, D in order to better your college experience." And he'll go, "Okay." And then it goes in one ear and out the other. Yet I can take, his college pastor or his high school pastor. I could take some family friends who are mentor roles. they can say the exact same words to him, and he'll come to me and say, Dad, you would not believe what Mr. Crosby said. And I'm like, yeah, because you haven't seen Mr. Crosby in his underwear. And so it's very important as parents that we surround our kids with like-minded, spiritually, godly guided people that our kids have not seen in their underwear, to say those messages into their life, or speak those messages into their lives.
And it's a caution. It's not to say make sure you're always dressed after you leave your room so your kids don't see you anywhere. It's that
right? No.
It's the other people that are team members with you in this, right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
And so, yeah, when you throw it out there, going the underwear rule, and your kids seeing you in your underwear, it perks people's, like Joel said, it's clickbait to a certain degree amongst Christian parents. But there's truth to it, that
that's good.
And so many times a parent will get so frustrated with their kid because they'll be like, I've been telling you that for years. How, why is it that coach said that? And now it's like, no, understand.
It's
that's
because your kids have seen you in your underwear. That's why.
Right.
Well, no, and I was that way as a kid too. My dad could tell me something and I wouldn't listen because I know my dad. He's always there, and but have someone else tell me, like a coach or a pastor, and I took it to heart. So I have a 23-year-old son who's now starting his life journey after college, and it's funny. My wife and I, some friends of ours, will ask us, what's Jacob doing? I don't know. Can you ask him, and can you tell us? Because as far as we can tell, he talks to other people and tells them all his plans and all that he's doing. He doesn't tell us. And then I was recently in the Midwest with some family, and our nephew, we went on a walk in the snow with him. He talked our ear off about his plans, his dreams. We came back and we told his parents, and he said that? We don't even know that. And I'm like, that's just the dynamic between parents and kids.
Yeah. Yep.
So I pray every day that my son will have those godly influences that'll speak to him, that he won't listen to me, but hopefully, just like I wouldn't listen to my dad, but I had good godly men inputting for me. That's just the way it works.
We have about 10 minutes left, and I want to probe you a little bit more, Joel, about something you were involved in. And Romeo, are you familiar with a movie called No Safe Spaces?
No, I am not.
Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager. So it was a documentary that came out a couple years ago. And they had a Hollywood premiere, etc. So Joel, you were a co-producer on that documentary.
Oh, cool.
But it didn't start out and this is the Hollywood, right? Hollywood, you have a project that it changes and morphs and can become something else. Can you, in the remaining time, tell us about your journey on that project, how it started and where it ended up?
Right. Through the podcast network, I was affiliated somewhat with RJ Moeller, who is Dennis Prager's producer, and Dennis and Adam, who are like the most mismatched partnership you can imagine. Dennis is an intellectual Jewish, guy from New York, and Adam Carolla, by his own admission, is just a schlub kind of guy from, Southern California, who's not very well educated.
Hollywood comedian.
Comedian and kind of a rough guy. And Dennis is a very refined guy, but they liked each other's content on the radio. And so they got together and they did a series of talks together at college campuses. And Christian Podcast Central sponsored a couple of those in Southern California. And so I was talking to RJ one day, and he came to me and he said, do you know anyone that would be interested in investing and being a co-producer in a movie with Dennis Prager? And I went, that'd be me. I'll do it. So back in 2015, I think, we all met. It's funny. RJ said, do you want to come to a Hollywood cocktail party in the hills of Hollywood? And I said, that's something I've never done. So I went to my wife and I go, you got a black dress? And she goes, yeah, let's go. So we went and had the Hollywood did the Hollywood thing, cocktail party up in the Hollywood Hills. And that's what the genesis of it. Talking about, and at that point, it had a different name. It had several different names to it, and even several different subjects it was going to tackle. So eventually,
working title or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of working titles. And eventually they decided on No Safe Spaces. And it's a movie about, at the time, what was only confined to college campuses, which basically cancel culture. Talking about the speech codes and the safe spaces in college campuses. And they did a lot. It was a documentary style. They did some, if you haven't seen the movie, Romeo, you really should see it. I think you'd really like it. They did some really creative stuff with footage from college campuses, footage of Dennis and Adam kind of doing their things. And then they mixed in some really pretty funny animations, take off on Schoolhouse Rock, which was pretty funny. The producers that did it were these guys in Hollywood that did a lot of the really creative political ads for Ted Cruz a few years ago that kind of were really hot. So I think it came out a couple years ago. And it's funny because at the time we made it or started, the idea came up. The phenomenon on college campuses was pretty much limited to college campuses. The speech codes and the canceling and all that kind of stuff. And I remember people at times saying, well, these college kids, when they get out in the real world, they'll learn that stuff doesn't fly. And I'm like, I hope so, but I have a feeling that they're going to take it with them and they're going to demand it in the real world. And unfortunately, they have. And now what was
that isn't going to go very well.
Yeah, it was pretty prophetic back then, and it's now the world we live in. So it was a very prescient kind of thing that they did. This is, and if you see the movie, during the premiere or during some screenings, I gave some talks on, trying to get people to help us out with it. And at one screening, when it was over, everyone was just kind of silent and stunned because of what they saw, what was going on. People didn't really know at the time what was going on these college campuses. And I went up and I said, well, I guess you weren't expecting to see a horror movie tonight, were you? And everyone kind of went, yeah, this is pretty scary stuff. So, so it was a learning experience. I learned a lot about how Hollywood works and how it doesn't work. And a little bit about making a film and all the frustrations and delays and things you have with it. But I think it turned out to be a pretty good movie. It was pretty well received. The message was maybe a little late, but it was spot on. So,
yeah, it sounds like it. And it sounds like something I would really enjoy. I love Adam Carolla. And I like Dennis Prager too. So I will definitely watch it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where is it available? You guys, because there's still, it's out there and you can still see it online, I guess now, right?
Right. Yeah, we had a lot of trouble getting it on because of who it was and because of the content. Mm-hmm. There was just a lot of trouble getting it on the usual places you want it, Amazon and all those other places. But definitely, if you search No Safe Spaces, you can definitely get it on its website, watch it there. But unfortunately, I'm not up on all the promotional end of it and where you can find it. But if you search for it, you'll find it.
Well,
they've got a really flowing presence on Facebook. I know too. If you go search up No Safe Spaces on Facebook, there's still every day there's content and opinions and articles being linked to and leads to stuff. There's links to the movie and where you can see it.
Oh, there you go.
Got it. Well, I was Joel's +1 at the Hollywood premiere, right? Joel was, you want to go to the premiere, premiere screening down in it's
Grauman's Chinese Theater.
Grauman's Chinese Theater, right? The famous, the Walk of Fame, etc. So we went down there and everybody was there, right? Like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and Clavin and you name it. And I actually sat next to, in the screening, I sat next to Dennis Prager's son's best friend, and we were chatting or whatever. And but I ran into at the screening Brian Godawa, who is a friend of our show. He's been on our show a couple of times, and that just sounded like Brian. I've been Brian's +1 at some screenings and stuff, and so it was funny running into him there because Brian and I are close personal friends. But I didn't know there's the guy who I guess he was the writer, because in documentaries you have writers. A guy named John Sullivan. Are you familiar with the John Sullivan, Joel? Does that name ring a bell?
It rings a bell, but I'm not.
So he was, I think, the writer, the producer and writer of No Safe Spaces, and he's a friend of Brian's, and through Brian, a friend of mine, and he's done a budget for me on one of my projects that's in development, etc. So it's this, it's this small world. This Hollywood is kind of a small world, but then when you get conservatives and Christians in Hollywood, I mean, Prager and Kroll are not Christian, but the conservatives will attract the Christians, and so it's a real small world that we're kind of in the middle of here. And I'm excited about what's happening. I think 2022 is actually we didn't really talk politics with you guys yet, so we'll have to have you back. But I'm looking forward to what God's doing in our country. Because there's some awful stuff happening and people's eyes are opening when bad things happen. Like we repeat that on this channel all the time, Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purposes. So God's not surprised by any of this awful stuff going on, but we need to wake up, and we are. Like the church is waking up, and the world is waking up.
As they wake up, we'll be here to give them the truth that they've been missing.
Is the perfect time to build platforms like Christian Podcast Central, like This Way Network, right? We're all on the same team, and we're building it, and we're creating a structure that when people start looking what is going on, we'll be here for them. Anything you guys would like to say to our audience, the final minute of the show? I'd like to give you guys a final sign off.
Yeah, just do continue to fight the good fight. With places like This Way Network, Christian Podcast Central, shows like Parent Like You Mean are what you've been searching for. And this is the stuff that's going to not only encourage you, but help arm you for fighting the good fight. And I tell you, I think you guys sum it up perfectly with each and every episode. And the truth is there's a battle waiting for us, and we got to gear up and work out and get ready to fight.
Yeah. And we're on the winning team.
We've read the end of the book.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
We know how this movie ends.
Yeah. So keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. We'll have you back, especially when we get the platform up and running. We'll tap you for some content to put on the network.
Okay.
This was really
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.